The Naruto universe has some of the craziest abilities we've seen across the fictional medium. Whether it's Sasori's ability to turn himself into a puppet, Kimimaro being able to use his spine as a weapon, and even Orichimaru being able to substitute himself from within his own body. All of these abilities are insane to some extent, but none of them come close to the Substitution Jutsu. You see, this jutsu is so nonsensical, it's absolutely baffling how this ability made it into the script. I have no idea what Kishimoto was thinking when he conceived of this ability because it makes absolutely no sense. To understand what I mean by this, let's go back to the first time the ability was used. This was during the bell test back in part 1 when Naruto thought he had a drop on Kakashi using his shadow clones. Yet when Naruto went in for the hit, to his surprise and to the surprise of the audience as well, he punched himself instead. At first it seemed as if Kakashi transformed into Naruto and mixed in with his shadow clones, which by itself wouldn't make sense since there wasn't any smoke on panel, but he apparently used the Substitution Jutsu instead. Sasuke then goes on to explain that this is normally done by quickly replacing your body with an animal or plant. This will usually confuse the opponent and create an opening for a chance to attack. So what Kakashi did in this instance was to switch his body with one of Naruto's shadow clones, which confused Naruto and caused him to damage himself. Now this, by the way, isn't really a problem. In fact, the Substitution Jutsu is based on an actual technique used by real ninjas to trick their opponents and open them up to a counterattack. The difference here is that the real technique works because they substitute themselves for things that can be mistaken as them, such as a mannequin or a dummy. While in Naruto, this is totally different since they typically substitute themselves with a piece of log, or in Kakashi's case, with Naruto's own shadow clone. Now, this can work in this instance, and it's even practical to say that Kakashi is that much faster than Team 7 at this point in the manga, that he's able to perception blitz Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura to the point that he's able to grab Naruto's clone, bring him back to his old position, and climb up into a nearby tree all before any of them are able to perceive it happening. It sounds crazy, but I would give it a pass purely from a relativistic standpoint. But then we get to the second time this ability was used and it just stopped making sense whatsoever. Because as seen later on in chapter 6, Kakashi was just standing there yapping off to Naruto and Sasuke attacked him with multiple shuriken. Kakashi could have dodged the shurikens or even deflected them with one of his abilities, but instead chose to use the Substitution Jutsu. Now where this starts to approach the point of absurdity is when Kishimoto decided to show Kakashi getting impaled by not just one, but all of them, to the point that blood is literally oozing from his body, only for it to be revealed that it was a block of wood that took the damage instead. We know this to be the case since Kakashi is shown to be totally fine just a panel later hiding in the bushes, which makes absolutely no sense since it showed blood oozing from his body just a few panels earlier. Mind you, just so we're clear, this ability works by the user moving so quickly that the opponent doesn't perceive them switching places with another object or person. It isn't genjutsu, it's literally high-speed movement. So why would it show Kakashi getting hit and blood oozing from his body when it never hit him in the first place? Where did the blood come from? It makes absolutely no sense. Mind you, this isn't even the most absurd application of this ability because later on in chapter 9, Team 7 was ambushed by two random ninjas 017, 015, whatever. It doesn't matter what their names are. The point is that these ninjas then proceed to wrap chains around Kakashi's body and ripped him into pieces. This is of course important to note because it's shown that Kakashi's actual body is ripped apart and individual pieces then fall to the ground along with, again, blood splatter. Yet again, it was later revealed that Kakashi survived the attack using Substitution Jutsu. And I want you guys to understand how insane this truly is. Again, this jutsu works by the user quickly grabbing a substitute and placing it in its place, then running away before being noticed. So for this to work, Kakashi has to be beyond blitz levels in speed above everyone, which could be the case and that could be fine. But you can't then show Kakashi's actual body being dismembered with blood being splattered all over. That doesn't happen if Kakashi himself didn't get damaged. And this is beyond absurd, by the way, because aside from the blood thing and Kakashi's actual body being shown to be dismembered, which doesn't make sense, they then later reveal that the dismembered portions of Kakashi's body were actually individual logs. Now, call me crazy, but is Kishimoto implying that even though Kakashi wasn't dismembered, the individual pieces of his body that we saw on panel did exist, but they were instead individual logs that looked like Kakashi's dismembered body? And if so, how? Are we saying that Kakashi is so fast that he was able to blitz the battlefield multiple times that he left after images of his body parts in different locations with an absurd amount of distance between each body part, then went and grabbed 12 logs to replace each body part with, all within a split second without no one noticing? Aside from the flash levels of speed this would require for Part 1 Kakashi that was never shown again in the franchise, it makes absolutely no sense how he was able to mimic his actual body parts being apart and later fall into the ground with blood oozing all over the battlefield by simply swapping his body with a block of wood. And I know there's gonna be someone in the comments saying it's fiction, it doesn't need to make sense, which ironically doesn't make sense. I'm not critiquing this ability based on its real world application. I'm using the description that was provided for the ability in said universe. If it was said that the ability is a form of genjutsu mixed in with high-speed taijutsu, it would make perfect sense. That would explain why it seems as if the person was hit, but it's later revealed that they weren't. It would explain the blood that isn't there, or why it seemed as if Kakashi was ripped apart. This works because the user is messing with your mind and forces you to see what they wanted you to see. And the fun thing about this is that this jutsu is listed as ninjutsu, not taijutsu, which for the life of me I don't understand. Ninjutsu itself is a broad term that has many uses, but in general it's more so meant to describe the outward application of chakra. That's the simplest way to put it, at least in comparison to taijutsu, whereas taijutsu more so represents the inward application of chakra, which can be used to boost your physical stats. Now taijutsu can exist absent of chakra since it's more so powered by stamina, as explained in part 1. But there are some taijutsu techniques that use chakra, such as the 8 gates. Yet, in spite of that fact, the 8 gates, which is powered by chakra, similar to the Substitution Jutsu, isn't called ninjutsu. They still refer to it as taijutsu, which is the correct term. And yes, the Substitution Jutsu does use chakra, and the reason we know this is because of Sakura. This was shown in chapter 54 in Sakura's fight versus the Sound Ninja. Before she was hit from behind, she made a few hand signs, then substituted using a piece of log. She then does it again after the attack she launched was deflected back to her before substituting for a piece of log once again. These hand signs are used to activate the jutsu, which in turn boosts one's physical stats using one's chakra. So we can assume that Kakashi does the same thing as well, but he's so fast with his hand signs that we don't even see him weaving them. This means that the ability is very similar to how the 8 gates manipulates chakra to boost one's physical stats, or when Naruto charges up the Nine-Tails chakra, which in turn increases his physical stats. Yet for some reason, Substitution, which is literally high-speed movement powered by chakra just like the others, is listed as ninjutsu while the others aren't. It just doesn't make sense. There was also this application of the ability that took place in episode 72 of Naruto's anime. Sasuke during his battle with Temari slipped on Gaara's sand and fell from a tree. Temari then used this opportunity to attack him with multiple kunai while he was still in mid-air, which made direct contact. Now, this application of the ability was so absurd that it showed Sasuke getting stabbed by the kunais, falling to the ground, and remaining on the ground long enough for Temari to walk over to him, all before turning into the substitute. And I want you guys again to understand how nonsensical this is. The ability works by the user running very quickly to grab a log and then putting it in his place. So why would it show Sasuke falling to the ground after being hit and remaining on the ground until Temari walked over to him? That would only make sense if Sasuke is still there and hasn't switched places with the log as yet, which clearly isn't true because Sasuke wasn't damaged, the log was. Unless, of course, we're meant to believe that Sasuke swapped places with the log when the kunai initially made contact, but was moving so fast that he left an after image that made it seem as if he was hit, then came back again, removed the kunai from the log, stabbed himself with it, but not fatally, fell to the ground, healed over and waited for Temari to get close, then swapped places with the log once again and placed the kunais back into the log. That's the only way this would make sense, and at that point, man, I think we're doing a bit much. At that point, just use that speed to go take out Temari. Like, what are we doing here? Because you're clearly perception blitz levels above Temari for this to even work. Mind you, this jutsu kinda messes up the power scaling as well, because while we could excuse these perception level blitz feats in part 1, it certainly doesn't make sense in part 2. Because in episode 3 of Shippuden, when Naruto first returned to the village, Mr. Kakashi used the jutsu once again after Naruto tricked him using his shadow clone and struck him from behind. He was able to speed blitz them with substitution despite the power difference between them not being that vast at that point in time. Ironically, Naruto's use of the Shadow Clone Jutsu in this instance and many others spanning across the series more so embodies the Substitution Jutsu because one believes that they're attacking the real Naruto, which is a body double, and the actual Naruto then uses this confusion to land his attack. That is what the Substitution Jutsu was meant to facilitate, but where Naruto's usage of the Shadow Clone makes sense, this ability simply doesn't. There was also this one usage, which is the last one I'm going to mention, when one of Nagato's paths was restricted by Jiraiya's ability. Yet he was able to leave his position, go grab a piece of log, place it in his position, then moved elsewhere. Mind you, they're both in an underground facility that is filled with metal pipes, but he was somehow able to go retrieve a piece of log from somewhere. We're left to believe that he left the facility, went upstairs, went outside, grabbed a piece of log from a tree somewhere, then returned to his position, all before Jiraiya even noticed, despite not being faster than Jiraiya in actual combat, which is how he got in this position in the first place. So yeah, this ability is just wild, man, absolutely hilarious. Now, there are ways this ability could have worked. As I said, Naruto's usage of the Shadow Clones as a substitute fixes some of the problems with this ability because Shadow Clones aren't an illusion. This jutsu creates a perfect copy of the user that has a physical body that even has its own blood. So if the Substitution Jutsu worked by the user running quickly to the side, spawning a Shadow Clone and then placing it in its position, it would make sense why it would show Kakashi bleeding. It would make sense why it would show his actual body being dismembered and Sasuke falling over and remaining there for multiple seconds. It would make sense since it would be a real physical body being affected, just not the users. This would also make more sense if the Shadow Clones didn't spawn in a gust of smoke because the user could have just created them in place and simply moved to a different position. Now this isn't the only option. This could work if we modified the transformation jutsu just by a tiny bit. What I mean is that let's say one uses the substitution jutsu, he could simply run to grab a piece of log, transform the log into a copy of himself, then place it in his position. This would then explain why it seems as if the person got hit. That's because they did, at least something that looks like them. It would also explain why it can seem as if Kakashi is bleeding or dismembered, something that looks like him was. And the log can transform back into a log when the user wants it to, which would explain the gust of smoke. This is funny because that's how I thought the ability worked for the longest time until I found that it isn't. And I have no idea why, because it's so simple. We already know that someone can apply the transformation jutsu to people and objects, as seen when Naruto transformed Gamabunta into the Ninetales, so the mechanic is already there. Now, the reason why I said we might need to modify the transformation jutsu a tiny bit is because I'm not sure if we can make something like an object transform into something that has blood and even seems lifelike to some extent. So if that isn't possible, Kishimoto could have simply just made it possible. In either case, this would work since all you need to do is just make something look like you with some fake blood, not bring it to life. Also, I'm not sure why this ability isn't an offshoot of body flicker, which is pretty much high speed movement. This is what ninjas use when they disappear and reappear in a different location at very fast speeds. It isn't teleportation, it's high speed movement powered by chakra, which is typically triggered by this hand sign. So I'm not entirely sure why the substitution jutsu that uses this exact type of high-speed movement isn't related to body flicker in any way. And I know some people believe that it is, but that can't be the case when the substitution jutsu is considered an E-rank jutsu, while the body flicker is considered D-rank. It just doesn't make sense for the substitution jutsu to consist of and literally be powered by body flicker while also being lesser ranked than body flicker itself. So either Kishimoto made some mistake with the ranking system or the substitution jutsu doesn't use body flicker. I have no idea. Now, another way this ability could work is if it worked similarly to Sasuke's amenorgetic Hara, which allows him to switch places with objects. So this would literally be space-time ninjutsu, which isn't really crazy since summon ninjutsu is also a space-time ninjutsu almost anyone can use, and no one sees that as a problem, so you know, it could work. So if Kishimoto went back in time and revised this ability to work this way, it would be relevant in Naruto even to this day, and the Ninja Storm games would actually make sense. With that said, that's it for the video. You know, if you guys have any problems, let me know in the comment section. If you guys liked it, drop a like down below, and if you're new, subscribe, and also consider becoming a member. But yeah, I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.